Russian T-72B3 tanks were built to spearhead assaults, yet in Ukraine, they now appear on screen as burning shells with torn turrets and black smoke rising under the small shadow of Ukrainian drones. Viewers see machines that once led armored pushes now stranded in craters, stuck between ruined houses or left half-repaired in forests. And in each scene, a drone circles overhead searching for the weak spot. Cheap FPV drones and Javelin missiles turn these tanks into targets because a single hit on an open hatch or a thin roof panel can trigger the ammunition inside and rip the vehicle apart. Clips spread fast on social media. But behind the flashes and shock, these strikes reveal a deeper change in land warfare that generals in Moscow, Kiev, and NATO capitals can no longer ignore. This report will follow the trail of destroyed T-72B3s and show how drones, missiles, and even older Ukrainian tanks now work together to hunt them down. This is military force, so stay with this breakdown, like the video, share it with others, and subscribe so you do not miss the next frontline story. FPV drones have turned into dedicated tank hunters on this front. And Russian T-72B3s that stop moving or roll without cover now sit at the top of their target list. In many clips from ruined towns, a single tank shell is all that remains of a failed push, and a small quadcopter can be seen hovering above the wreck, scanning every angle of the armor. The reconnaissance drone circles slowly over broken streets and collapsed walls, and the operator watches the video feed to find thin plates, open hatches, or gaps around the turret ring where a shaped charge can bite. Once that weak point is marked, an FPV platform is launched from a hidden position, and it races in at low altitude, hugging trees and rubble so that no crewman or gunner has time to react. Instead of striking the front glasses, which is built to withstand heavy hits, pilots guide their machines toward the softer roof or the exposed rear, because these spots are more likely to trigger internal fires on tanks that have been abandoned after a fight. The situation is even worse since crews often leave hatches open, side skirts torn, and extra fuel or ammunition scattered around the hull. A grenade or small warhead that falls through an open hatch does not need much explosive power because the narrow fighting compartment amplifies the pressure and sends hot fragments across the controls, seats, and stored shells. That blast can start a fire that burns through cables and hydraulics before reaching the carousel of ammunition under the crew. And once those rounds begin to cook off, the turret can lift off its ring and land meters away. Vehicles that have bogged down in shell holes or slid into ditches face the same fate as their engines struggle in the mud, and their tracks throw up clear dust trails that make them easy to spot from the air. Crews in that situation often focus on towing or repair work and forget that the real threat is no longer in front of the gun barrel, but somewhere above the tree line. Ukrainian units treat these stranded machines as high-value opportunities because destroying them with drones blocks any attempt by Russian recovery teams to pull them back for overhaul. Every tank that is burned in place also denies Moscow spare parts, holes for refit programs, and propaganda footage of armored forces advancing under control. The wider pattern shows a cold logic at work since cheap FPV kits are being traded for heavily upgraded T-72B3s, and each exchange drains the stock of modern Russian armor at very low cost to Kiev. For analysts following this war, these scenes of abandoned vehicles being finished off from above naturally lead to a sharper question, which is what happens when T-72B3s are still in the fight and yet are stopped in mid-attack by Javelin teams on the ground. When a missile team kills the lead tank and freezes the rest of the column, the same drones that hunt wrecks in towns can switch to hunting live armor on the road. FPV operators wait for that moment of panic When drivers reverse, smoke grenades pop, and formations lose their clean lines. In those confused seconds, one flight of drones can move in from several angles, striking engines, turrets, and recovery vehicles at the same time. That link between javelin ambushes on the ground and FPV strikes from the air now defines how many of these armored assaults end. Russian T-72B3 tanks are not only lost when they sit still, because many are destroyed while they are firing and moving forward under full power. In several battle clips, a crew can be seen loading shells inside the turret, while the gunner lines up the sight and the driver pushes the vehicle toward Ukrainian lines. The cannon fires again and again and dust blows around the hull as the tank tries to press the defense, since its job is to break open strong points and scare infantry out of cover. From the side of the screen, however, a small flash shows the moment when a javelin team in hiding finally pulls the trigger after watching the advance for long enough. The missile climbs into the sky instead of flying straight. And this strange arc is important because the guidance system is designed to bring the warhead down on top of the target. When the javelin reaches the right point above the tank, it bends its path and drops toward the thinner roof armor that protects the crew and the carousel of ammunition. A direct hit on that panel can send a jet of metal through the internal space, and that blast can cut wires, smash sights, and injure crewmen in seconds. Some videos show 2 or 3 missiles launched in a row, and even if one impact is enough to find the vehicle, extra shots make sure the crew cannot restart the engine or bring the gun back into action. For teams on the ground, this is a cold calculation because every rocket is expensive. Yet allowing a damaged T-72B3 to recover and close the range could cost many lives. Russian designers gave this model better sights, stronger engines, and added armor compared with older tanks. But the basic shape and layout still come from a time before top attack missiles were common on the battlefield. Most of the protection sits on the front and lower sides since older threats came from straight ahead, while the turret roof remains relatively thin because weight and space are limited. Modern launch units can mark a target and then move away while the missile guides itself, so the crews firing javelins do not need to stay exposed while the tank searches for them. This distance and automation reduce risk for the operators, and they increase pressure on armored units that must move under the threat of hidden teams that can strike from beyond the range of the main gun. Commanders on both sides can see from these engagements that even upgraded Soviet designs reach their limits when weapons that think in 3 dimensions enter the fight. That is why many analysts still treat guided anti-tank missiles as a classic but reliable layer of defense, even in a war filled with cheap drones and viral footage. For Ukraine, this mix of fixed missile ambushes and flexible drone strikes is starting to act like a single hunting system, and it shapes every later step that involves FPV attacks from close range. Close-range drone attacks have become the most personal and frightening threat for T-72B3 crews because strikes now focus on open hatches and thin roof armor instead of thick frontal plates. In many recordings, a small quadcopter hangs almost motionless above the turret, and the operator patiently lines up a drop while the crew below has no clear way to hit back. When the time feels right, a single grenade falls through an open hatch, and the explosion sends fire and metal fragments through the driver's position and the fighting compartment in one violent burst. Flames first wrap around seats, cables, and loose gear, and then the heat spreads to stored shells and propellant charges that sit only a short distance away from the blast point. If those charges ignite, the pressure inside the turret can spike in an instant, and the stored energy that once gave the gun its power now tears the vehicle apart from the inside. Other scenes show FPV platforms coming in low from the rear, looping up behind the turret and smashing into panels that were never built to stop a shaped warhead arriving from that angle. One drone hits the back of the turret ring, another rams the roof near the commander's cupola, and a third dives into a damaged area, and together they turn a seemingly intact tank into a burning wreck. The top side of a T-72B3 is crowded with sights, periscopes, vents, and sensor blocks. And armor around these features is often thinner because designers had to save weight and leave room for equipment. Even a small explosive charge that detonates near those fittings can break glass, bend mounting brackets, and open new gaps where later hits will go even deeper into the structure. Inside the hole, the space is tight and full of hard surfaces, so shock waves bounce off steel walls and turret rings, which means fragments keep moving and cutting through anything soft in their path. Crews know this, yet many still travel with at least one hatch open during long missions because they need fresh air, better visibility, and a quick escape route if the vehicle suddenly catches fire. On quiet stretches of the front, that habit feels harmless. But under a sky filled with cheap cameras and armed drones, it turns an open hatch into an invitation rather than a safety measure. Ukrainian operators exploit that weakness by flying at treetop height, listening to engine sounds, and then sitting above a target until the crew makes a small mistake that exposes the interior. This method changes the role of the drone pilot since the job is less about long-range strikes and more about performing careful surgery on a single armored vehicle until it cannot be recovered. Each successful hit from this distance also pushes tank crews to move less and hide more, which narrows their options and makes any later breakdown or traffic jam even more dangerous. Once a heavy vehicle stops because of mud, damage, or panic, the same close-range tactics can be repeated again and again until the trapped T-72B3 is turned into a permanent wreck on the battlefield. The next group of targets were the tanks that got stuck, broke down, or tried to hide while waiting for repairs. These T-72B3s looked safe for a moment, but once they stopped moving, they turned into magnets for drones. In one video, a tank sits half buried in a muddy pit. Its tracks spin but go nowhere. A single FPV drone flies low through the smoke. The first blast lights up the rear section, but the fire doesn't end it. A second FPV rushes in and hits the roof of the same tank, punching through the armor and igniting the carousel ammunition inside. Within seconds, the vehicle becomes a fireball. What started as a stuck engine ends with the entire turret thrown several meters away. This sequence shows how little margin for error these tanks now have under drone surveillance, because once they are fixed in place, every meter of cover becomes a death zone. Another clip shows a T-72B3 deep in a forest clearing, hidden under tree branches and camouflage nets. A few soldiers work around it trying to repair the track and refuel. The silence breaks when an FPV enters from above the tree line. It locks on and slams into the open rear deck. A flash, then a violent explosion bursts through the turret ring. Flames shoot out like a torch, and when the smoke clears, the turret lies upside down beside the burned hull. The crew had no time to react, and the blast shows the same deadly chain reaction known as a cook-off. Inside these Soviet-era tanks, the shells are stored in a circular carousel under the crew's feet. When a strike penetrates from above, fragments and heat trigger those shells one after another. The pressure builds until it blows the turret off completely. This is why even a light FPV hit, if aimed well, can destroy a main battle tank that weighs more than 40 tons. Another wreck tells a different story, but ends the same way. A T-72B3 was parked inside a half-collapsed building, using the concrete walls as cover. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones spotted the heat signature from above. Moments later, an FPV slipped through the broken roof and exploded inside the structure. The fire spread through the interior, igniting the ammunition and turning the entire building into a single burning frame. From the outside, only smoke and metal sparks marked where the tank had been hidden. The ruins became both a shelter and a tomb. These strikes reveal how carefully Ukraine manages its FPV waves. Operators never waste drones on single uncertain hits. Each attack comes in a planned sequence. The first FPV to damage or ignite, the second to finish the target, still smoking, and sometimes a third to ensure no recovery team can tow it away. This layered approach guarantees that the vehicle is not only destroyed, but unreoverable. A burned hole can be welded and reused, but a detonated turret and melted gun breech mean permanent loss. For Ukrainian units, this precision saves money and time, since each FPV costs a fraction of the tank it destroys. And for Russian crews, it creates constant fear that even a damaged but safe position could be their final one. The most striking change lies in how drones erase the old rules of repair and retreat. A tank once disabled could be fixed overnight or towed back for service. Now the time between breaking down and being targeted can be just minutes. Every tree-line, ruin, or trench that hides a machine becomes a hunting ground. The war has turned stillness into risk and motion into survival. With aerial eyes above and explosive wings waiting, no temporary shelter is safe anymore. Whether a T-72B3 hides in a pit, a forest edge, or a city ruin, the result is the same. Once seen, it is marked, and once marked, it will burn. That is how reconnaissance and FPV together have turned every hole in the ground into a trap for steel. Ukraine's drone operations now show a clear pattern of purpose, not chaos. Every strike fits into a system where each drone has a defined job and every target is ranked by value and timing. This method separates chance from design, and it is why so many Russian tanks, especially the T-72B3s, never return from the field. Ukrainian units don't send drones at random. They classify their targets before launching anything. If a tank is still intact and moving, it is marked as high priority for FPV suicide drones. Ukrainian drone operators now prioritize precision. FPV drones target the turret ring or ammunition storage to ensure total destruction, not mere damage. For abandoned or already burning T-72B3s, they switched to small quadcopters, dropping grenades or incendiary devices. The mission is simple: finish the job, incinerate whatever remains, and leave nothing salvageable for Russian recovery teams. When a tank is under repair or hiding, reconnaissance drones loiter overhead, patiently waiting for the crew to let their guard down. Only then does the FPV strike, catching them completely off guard. This tightly controlled cycle of destruction eliminates any hope of revival and hands Ukraine a decisive timing advantage in every armored engagement. That precision feeds directly into combined arms kills. In one widely shared video, a Russian T-72B3 advances aggressively toward Ukrainian positions, firing multiple rounds through smoke and shattered trees. Suddenly, it veers sharply and slams into a thick trunk, the driver blinded or disoriented. Moments later, a Ukrainian T-64B3 emerges from behind a berm, calmly lines up the shot, and fires. The first round punches into the side armor. A brief pause, then a second shell strikes the same spot. A bright flash erupts from the turret ring as thick smoke billows out. The T-72B3 grinds to a halt, turret cracked open, flames pouring from inside. Drone footage confirms the kill. Observers note the Ukrainian crew had live overhead feeds delivering exact position, bearing, and movement data. Old Soviet steel on the ground, guided by digital eyes in the sky, turned a fleeting encounter into a textbook, one-sided victory. This fight proves Ukraine's defense no longer relies solely on Western hardware. The T-72B3 is a decades-old design, yet it remains deadly when networked with modern drone intelligence. Aging armor becomes a perfect ambush tool when it knows exactly where the enemy is and where it's going. For Russia's modernized T-72B3s, the challenge is now insurmountable. Every advance is tracked. Route, heat signature, muzzle flashes, all transmitted in real time. Even when drones don't strike directly, they vector artillery, javelin teams, or friendly tanks onto the target. The T-72B3 is effectively hunted long before it ever reaches Ukrainian lines. By the time it appears in sight, the defenders already have range, coordinates, and perfect timing locked in. The bigger picture is clear. Ukraine has forged an integrated battlefield network where drones, missiles, and tanks share one continuous intelligence stream. FPVS fracture columns, Javelin's halt reinforcements, and T-64BVS deliver the final blow. These overlapping layers form a tightening noose around Russian armor, leaving fewer safe corridors and zero room to regroup. Each burning T-72B3 isn't just lost metal. It's evidence that coordination now trumps raw armor inside. From sky to soil, this connected web has transformed open terrain into a kill zone, where every Russian tank movement is watched, judged, and eliminated. These repeated images of T-72B3s destroyed by FPV drones, javelins, and older Ukrainian tanks are redrawing the map of land warfare. Heavy armor still matters, but every advance is monitored in real time. A vehicle once built for breakthrough assaults has become a slow, exposed target, vulnerable through open hatches and thin roof armor. Ukraine's strength lies in linking inexpensive drones, guided missiles, and legacy tanks into a single cohesive system. The network itself is the decisive weapon, far more important than any individual platform. Instead of chasing one miracle system, Ukraine builds layered, interlocking capabilities that squeeze Russian armor until no safe path remains. The critical question facing every modern army is straightforward. Can thick steel and massive turrets survive an era where a cheap quadcopter can end a multi-million-dollar tank? Without radical changes in doctrine and training, many armored forces may discover their greatest threat no longer comes from another tank, but from the quiet buzz of a drone overhead. Viewers watching these engagements are witnessing the first draft of tomorrow's ground wars, wherever they may be fought. For straight talk on real battles, cutting-edge systems, and the politics driving them, like this report, share it, and subscribe to World War History.